Jesse and Christine's journey begins with an idea that is simple in concept, yet life-changing in meaning. It's a dream filled with excitement, hope, and a deeply personal purpose that makes the project far more than just another build. Tucked away in the boreal forests of northern Ontario lies a peaceful 8-acre property that Jesse and Christine now call their own. Rather than hiring a crew, they make a bold decision to take on the challenge of building an A-frame cabin with their own hands, turning a secluded piece of wilderness into something uniquely theirs. Before any of the exciting construction could begin, Jesse and Christine first had to tackle the groundwork that often goes unnoticed. During the fall prior to the build, their focus was on preparing the site and installing the essential infrastructure. Trenches were excavated for water and electrical lines, a large septic tank was put in place, and a raised septic system was constructed to support the future cabin. None of it was particularly exciting, and much of the work was physically demanding, dirty, and time-consuming. But these foundational tasks were critical, laying the groundwork that would make everything else possible later on. With the concrete footings poured and fully cured, Jesse and Christine are ready to move on to the next stage of the foundation. To elevate the structure above the ground, sonotube forms are installed and prepared for the concrete columns. Since reinforcing steel was already embedded in the footings, additional rebar is tied into place, creating a continuous reinforced connection that extends through the entire column system. This helps ensure the foundation acts as a single, unified structure capable of supporting the cabin above. Once everything is properly aligned, the sonotubes are filled with concrete. Before the material sets, mounting brackets are carefully positioned and adjusted with precision. Their placement is critical, as these brackets will serve as the connection point for the framing that follows, making accuracy at this stage essential for the rest of the build. With the foundation work progressing smoothly, attention shifts to assembling the outer support beams that will form the framework of the cabin. Before the beams are installed, their exposed edges are carefully treated with a moisture-resistant coating to help protect the wood from long-term exposure to the elements. It's a small step that can make a significant difference in durability over time. Once protected, the beams are lifted into position and secured to the metal brackets installed earlier. The work moves forward in a steady, methodical way. Each component is carefully aligned, temporarily fastened, and checked before permanent connections are made. Piece by piece, the structural framework begins to take shape, setting the stage for the next major phase of construction. The project now reaches one of its first major milestones, raising the very first A-frame truss. It's a moment they've been working toward for months, and seeing the structure finally begin to rise brings a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Up until now, most of the work has taken place close to the ground. Suddenly, the challenge shifts to working at height, where every movement requires more caution and precision. As the truss is lifted into position, balance becomes critical. Each adjustment has to be made carefully, with every step planned out to keep the structure stable and secure. It's one of those defining moments in a build where the vision starts becoming visible, but it also demands patience, focus, and teamwork to get it done safely. Once the first truss is finally standing upright, the immediate priority is making sure it remains stable. Temporary bracing is installed to hold it securely in place, preventing any unwanted movement while the rest of the structure is assembled around it. With the first lift successfully completed, attention quickly turns to improving the process for the remaining trusses. Like many stages of a self-build project, the first attempt serves as a learning experience. Jesse and Christine take time to evaluate what worked well and what could be done more efficiently. Additional temporary supports are added, lifting procedures are reviewed more carefully, and adjustments are made to the rigging system to improve control during future lifts. These small refinements may not seem dramatic, but they help make each successive truss installation safer, smoother, and far more efficient than the one before. Even with the improvements in place, the work remains far from easy. Each A-frame has a tendency to move under its own weight during installation. The peak can dip slightly, the structure flexes more than expected, and aligning the base perfectly often takes multiple adjustments before everything falls into place. It's a slow process that demands patience and constant attention to detail. But as additional A-frames are raised and secured, a noticeable transformation begins to happen. What started as a series of individual components gradually becomes a unified structure. Once the frames are connected together with permanent bracing and framing members, much of the unwanted movement disappears. The entire skeleton of the cabin grows stronger with every connection, gaining the rigidity and stability it was designed to have. Little by little, the structure stops feeling temporary and starts feeling like a real building standing in the forest. With the frame now taking shape, work shifts to the sheathing. OSB panels are installed one by one, starting at the bottom of the A-frame and steadily moving upward as the structure continues to come together. The goal is to get the shell enclosed as quickly as possible to stay ahead of the weather, while still taking the time to make sure every panel is installed correctly. It's a careful balance between moving efficiently and maintaining the accuracy needed to keep the structure straight, secure, and built to last. As additional panels are installed, the change in the structure becomes easy to notice. With every sheet fastened into place, the frame grows stronger and more stable. The sheathing helps lock everything together, reducing flex and movement while adding rigidity throughout the entire cabin. With the lower walls fully secured, Jesse turns his attention to the roof. He begins installing a layer of synthetic underlayment across the steep slopes. Unlike traditional tar paper, this modern material is lighter, easier to handle, and allows better airflow while still providing weather protection. But as the work moves farther up the roofline, the challenge quickly grows. The higher he climbs, the more every step demands balance, focus, and careful footing. At this point, ladders alone are no longer practical. The steep pitch of the A-frame roof makes every movement more challenging, requiring patience and careful footing with each step. Working at that height becomes a constant balance between maintaining progress and staying safe. To make the job more manageable, Jesse builds a set of custom roof jacks. Designed specifically to match the roof's angle, these metal brackets support sturdy planks and create a secure working platform, giving him a much safer and more stable place to stand while working overhead. With the roof jacks in place, the work can continue much more smoothly. The added stability allows them to keep installing panels up the roof without constantly stopping to reposition or rethink their approach. As the structure rises higher, they maintain a steady pace and keep the project moving forward efficiently. The next phase is installing a standing seam metal roof. With the cabin reaching nearly 35 feet at its highest point, the task feels far more intimidating than anything they've tackled so far. There's a lingering uncertainty in the air, not only about executing the installation correctly, but about whether two people can realistically manage a roofing system of this scale without outside help. Even so, the roofing materials have already arrived, and there's really only one option left: keep moving forward. At this stage, turning back is no longer part of the plan. The metal panels arrive in massive sections, each measuring 35 feet long and 16 inches wide. Stacked beside the cabin and ready for installation, they're both impressive and intimidating. The standing seam system is engineered so each panel locks tightly into the next, creating a clean appearance with no exposed fasteners and providing long-term durability against the elements. But that precision comes with pressure. A roof system like this demands accuracy from the very beginning, because once a panel is secured and locked into place, making corrections becomes difficult. Every piece has to be positioned carefully, knowing that each decision will affect everything that follows. The real challenge comes from handling a single sheet of metal that's 35 feet long. It's bulky, difficult to maneuver, and any mistake can quickly become a problem. Keeping it straight without bending, flexing, or twisting takes patience and coordination. Jesse begins strengthening the floor system based on the loads it will eventually need to support. Along the exterior bearing points, where the greatest structural demands are expected, he installs triple laminated beams for added strength. In the interior sections, double laminated members provide the necessary support while keeping the framing efficient. It's a calculated approach that ensures the floor is built to handle future weight without adding unnecessary material. With the floor framing complete, attention shifts to the space beneath the cabin. The crawl space now becomes the focus of the work. Working from below, they begin fastening pressure-treated plywood to the underside of the joists. This layer serves an important purpose. It creates a contained cavity that will support and secure the floor insulation. By enclosing the underside of the floor system, they're building a stronger thermal barrier that will help keep the cabin comfortable throughout the changing seasons. It's far from an easy task. The crawl space is cramped, the ground below is damp, and every sheet of plywood has to be wrestled into position overhead before it can be secured. Progress comes slowly, with each panel requiring effort, patience, and plenty of awkward maneuvering. It's the kind of work that looks straightforward from the outside, but proves much more demanding once you're actually underneath the cabin doing it. In northern Ontario, winter temperatures can plunge to -40 degrees, making insulation one of the most important parts of the entire build. Without it, even a well-built cabin can struggle to keep the cold outside. To handle those harsh conditions, Jesse and Christine choose mineral wool insulation. It's naturally fire-resistant, repels moisture, and isn't attractive to pests. Unlike fiberglass, it holds its shape over time and resists settling, helping maintain consistent performance year after year. In a climate this extreme, those advantages can make a huge difference. The insulation is installed in multiple layers, filling each joist bay completely to maximize thermal performance. By doubling up the material, they significantly increase the floor's insulating value, helping the cabin retain heat even during the coldest winter conditions. The job is still messy and creates plenty of dust, but it's easier to work with than they anticipated. To protect the floor system from moisture, they install a heavy-duty vapor barrier across the entire floor. Large sheets are rolled out carefully, covering the surface from end to end. Once sealed in place, the barrier forms a continuous layer of protection, helping prevent moisture from migrating into the floor assembly. It creates a clear separation between the warm interior of the cabin and the cold conditions below, improving both durability and energy efficiency. The last stage of the floor system is laying the plywood subfloor. One by one, the tongue and groove panels are fitted together, each sheet locking tightly into the next to create a strong, unified surface. As the installation progresses, the transformation is instantly noticeable. The days of balancing on narrow joists are over. In their place is a solid, continuous floor that makes the entire structure feel more complete, stable, and ready for the next phase of construction. At this stage, it's hard not to stop and imagine the finished space. You can start to see where the kitchen will take shape, where the bed will eventually sit, and how the cabin is slowly transforming from a construction site into a home. As the vision becomes clearer, even the smaller functional details begin to matter more. Openings are carefully cut for plumbing and electrical lines, laying the groundwork for the systems that will bring the space to life. To safeguard the utility lines entering the cabin, they build a compact enclosure using pressure-treated plywood. The box serves as a protected pathway, allowing both the waterline and electrical conduit to pass through the floor system safely. In a climate this extreme, there's no room for shortcuts. Even the smallest opening could become a problem during winter, so every connection is carefully sealed and insulated. The goal is simple: keep the cold out and protect the systems that the cabin will rely on year-round. With the utility lines neatly routed and protected, the overall system starts to come together. Beneath it all, the subfloor is now fully insulated and prepared for the next stages of construction. It's a significant turning point in the build. The focus is no longer just on standing up to the harsh conditions outside, but on creating a comfortable space within. Little by little, the project is shifting from an exposed job site into a sheltered interior designed to keep warmth in and winter out. With the insulation, vapor barrier, and subfloor now complete, Jesse and Christine are ready to tackle the next major phase of the A-frame cabin: framing the end walls. The process begins with the bottom sill plate, which serves as the foundation for the entire wall assembly. Before any framing goes up, a moisture barrier is carefully installed beneath the plates, creating a protective layer that helps seal out moisture and safeguard the wood from long-term exposure. This is the point where the cabin begins to feel less like a construction project and more like a future home. Every stud, every opening, and every connection is placed with intention. The choices made here will remain part of the structure for years to come, shaping how the space functions and feels. It's the stage where the layout becomes real, determining where doors will welcome people in, where windows will frame the views and let in natural light, and how the interior will ultimately come together as a place to live. Not every step goes according to plan. While building the header over the front entry, they realize part of the framing is missing. A few of the required king studs were left out of the original layout, forcing them to pause and reassess. Rather than pushing forward, they take the time to correct the issue. Sections of the wall are carefully taken apart and rebuilt to match the structural requirements. It's a frustrating setback, but it's also a normal part of building, catching mistakes early and fixing them properly before they become bigger problems later on. In the end, it turns out to be more of a course correction than a true setback. Moments like these are simply part of the reality of building something from the ground up. Plans get refined, details get adjusted, and unexpected issues have to be solved as they appear. The important thing is making those changes while ensuring the structure remains strong, safe, and built exactly the way it should be. With the front wall finished, attention turns to the rear of the cabin. This is where an important detail, one that wasn't immediately obvious, starts to matter. Blocking is installed between the trusses to create solid fastening points for the wall framing. Without it, there wouldn't be enough structural backing to secure everything properly. It's one of those tasks that doesn't stand out when the project is complete, but it plays a critical role in making the entire structure stronger and more reliable. This section of the cabin is framed a little differently due to the loft overhead. Rather than relying on a dedicated beam like the front wall, the loft joists themselves serve as the primary structural support for the wall beneath. Even so, the framing process follows the same basic principles. A sill plate, top plate, and side plates are installed to establish the wall's full outline. Together, these components define the wall's perimeter and create the critical connection points that will support the framing, finishes, and structural elements added in the stages ahead. Jesse begins laying plywood across the loft joists, transforming the space into a solid working platform. Until now, the loft has been little more than a framework of exposed joists, requiring careful footing with every step. But as the plywood sheets are installed, the space quickly takes on a different feel. What was once an open structure becomes a stable, functional floor, making it easier to move around, work safely, and continue building the cabin from above. Attention then moves to the upper section of the rear wall. This area carries a considerable amount of structural load, so the framing surrounding the opening needs to be especially strong and well supported. A large window is planned for this section, occupying most of the wall and eventually bringing in plenty of natural light. Before any pieces are installed, Jesse and Christine carefully measure, mark, and verify every dimension. Taking the extra time now helps ensure the opening is perfectly aligned and matches the design exactly as intended. The sheathing process begins at the lower corner of the wall, where full OSB panels can be installed with minimal trimming. They're using the same material that was applied on the roof, creating consistency throughout the structure. Each sheet must be positioned precisely, with the edges landing directly over the framing members below. If a joint or seam falls out of alignment, Jesse and Christine pause to make adjustments before securing it in place. Taking the time to get it right ensures the wall remains strong, straight, and properly supported from the very beginning. It's the kind of detail that can easily go unnoticed, but it plays an important role in the long-term performance of the structure. Even something as simple as leaving a small gap between adjacent panels is done intentionally. That extra space allows the material to naturally expand and contract as moisture levels change throughout the seasons. Without it, the panels could swell, warp, or buckle over time, creating problems that are much harder to fix later on. Window and door openings bring an added layer of complexity to the framing process. Rather than breaking the sheathing into multiple small sections, Jesse and Christine try to keep each panel as large and continuous as possible. Using full sheets around the openings helps maintain the wall's structural integrity and reduces weak points. Larger, uninterrupted sections distribute loads more effectively, making the entire wall stronger and more durable than one assembled from numerous smaller pieces. To make that approach work, they first lift full sheets of sheathing into position and use the framed openings themselves as a guide. The outlines of the windows and doors are traced directly onto the panels, eliminating much of the guesswork. In practice, it's often faster and more precise than measuring and cutting everything beforehand. Once the markings are complete, the sheets are lowered, trimmed to size, and then lifted back into place. The result is a much cleaner fit, with the openings lining up accurately around each window and door. With the lift available and the experience gained from sheathing the back wall, work on the front wall moves much more quickly. The process feels smoother and more organized, even with multiple window and door openings to navigate around. Lessons learned from the previous stage help eliminate a lot of trial and error. There are still a few areas where small filler pieces are necessary, but they're positioned carefully and strategically. By placing them in the right locations, Jesse and Christine maintain the wall's structural integrity while keeping the sheathing layout as strong and efficient as possible. By the second day, the end is finally within reach. Only a handful of panels remain on the upper sections, and the entire exterior is on the verge of being completed. As those final pieces go into place, the transformation is impossible to miss. For the first time, the cabin is completely enclosed in solid sheathing, giving it a sense of permanence it didn't have before. What once felt like a collection of individual parts now feels like a real structure. The open framework is gone, the walls are fully standing, the roof is overhead, and the main shell of the cabin is finally complete. There's still a long list of tasks ahead, but the biggest hurdle has been cleared. The vision that started as an idea is now standing there in front of them, taking shape as a finished home. With the main structure complete, the project enters a new stage, one focused less on building and more on protecting what has already been built. The next step is installing a weather-resistant barrier over the exterior sheathing. This layer acts as a shield against the elements, preventing wind, rain, and snow from penetrating the wall system, while still allowing trapped moisture from inside the cabin to escape. At the same time, attention turns to a part of the project that's a little more personal, the front deck. It brings a completely different feeling to the build. Unlike the structural work hidden behind walls, this is a space meant to be experienced and enjoyed. It's easy to imagine peaceful mornings with a cup of coffee, quiet evenings watching the sunset, or simply sitting outside and taking in the beauty of the surrounding forest. By this stage, the project is no longer about construction. It's about creating a place where everyday moments can happen. The deck represents that shift, moving beyond beams and walls and toward the lifestyle the cabin was always meant to provide. The front deck is planned to stretch a full 24 feet across, extending evenly from the center of the cabin to create a balanced, welcoming outdoor space. To support that span, multiple layers of lumber are laminated together, forming beams strong enough to handle the expected loads. As the framework takes shape, blocking is installed at key locations to reinforce the assembly, reduce movement, and strengthen the connections throughout the structure. With each piece added, the deck becomes more rigid, creating a sturdy foundation for the space that will eventually bring the indoors and outdoors together. Jesse and Christine decide to add a perimeter border around the deck, and the impact is greater than they expected. What seems like a small design choice instantly gives the deck a cleaner, more polished appearance. The edges look more refined, and the entire structure feels thoughtfully planned rather than simply assembled. The upgrade does require a bit of rework. Some of the boards installed earlier need to be trimmed and recut, while additional blocking is added beneath the deck to provide proper support for the revised design. It takes extra time and effort, but the improvement is immediately noticeable. Sometimes it's these smaller finishing details that make a project feel truly complete. To help the deck stand up to years of exposure, Jesse and Christine take extra measures to protect the framing from moisture. The beams are first coated with a water-resistant treatment, adding another layer of defense against rain, snow, and seasonal humidity. Once that is complete, strips of ice and water membrane are applied over the most vulnerable areas, covering the tops of the joists and beams where moisture is most likely to collect. These protective layers may not be visible once the deck is finished, but they play a major role in extending its lifespan. As the work progresses, the transformation becomes obvious. What started as an exposed framework of lumber is gradually becoming a durable, weather-resistant platform. With every board and layer added, the deck feels less like a construction project and more like a finished outdoor living space. The deck boards are installed one at a time, and with every new row, the transformation becomes more noticeable. What was once just a framework of joists and beams is now beginning to look like a finished outdoor space. As they work across the deck, Jesse and Christine pay close attention to the spacing between each board. It's a small detail, but an important one. Because wood naturally expands and contracts with changes in temperature and moisture, the gaps can't simply be uniform everywhere. Some boards are installed a little tighter, while others are given slightly more space, depending on the material and conditions. The goal is to ensure that over time, the deck continues to look straight, balanced, and professionally finished. It's careful work, but those small adjustments help create the clean, consistent appearance that defines the final result. Another major milestone finally arrives: the installation of the windows and doors. It's one of those stages that instantly changes how the cabin feels. But getting everything into place is far from simple. The units are large, heavy, and difficult to maneuver, so every movement has to be deliberate and carefully controlled to keep them properly aligned within the openings. The front door presents an even bigger challenge. With its added weight and size, the job requires extra hands and plenty of coordination. Together, they carefully lift, position, and guide it into the frame, making small adjustments along the way. Nothing is rushed. Every side, corner, and gap is checked repeatedly to ensure a perfect fit before the door is finally secured. It's a slow process, but one that pays off immediately. Once the windows and door are in place, the cabin starts feeling less like a structure under construction and more like a real home taking shape in the woods. The remaining gaps are sealed with expanding foam and tape. The foam fills every small void around the windows and door, creating a tight seal, while the tape neatly covers the seams and locks the connections in place. Meanwhile, the toughest challenge of the build so far arrives with the loft window. At roughly 6 feet wide and 7 feet tall, it's enormous, and the triple pane glass makes it incredibly heavy. Installing it requires a whole different strategy from anything they've done up to this point. Up to this point, most of the attention has been on the front of the cabin. But after taking a closer look at the rear side, it becomes obvious that things can't stay the way they are. Before the back deck can take shape, the foundation has to be extended to properly carry the additional load. To ensure a solid connection, beam brackets are installed into the concrete using anchoring epoxy. Not all of the hardware lines up perfectly at first, so a little improvisation is needed along the way. The brackets are wet set into the fresh concrete and carefully adjusted while the mix begins to cure, allowing everything to be aligned before it fully hardens. The last step of this phase is reinforcing the connections with laminated plates that bridge each joint. Every plate is cut to span roughly 4 feet, extending across both sides of the splice. By overlapping the joints this way, the load is distributed more evenly throughout the structure, creating a stronger and more unified support system. With each new layer installed, the improvement becomes immediately noticeable. The entire assembly grows tighter and significantly more solid. What once felt like individual framing sections gradually merges into a single continuous beam system built to handle serious loads. Even before the final finishes are added, the added strength and stability are already clear to see. Before the decking boards can be installed, the structure needs to be protected from water intrusion. Flashing is carefully formed and fitted along the back wall and around the doorway. Its job is simple but critical. Any rainwater that reaches the surface is directed away from the structure instead of being allowed to collect underneath, where it could lead to moisture damage over time. A waterproof membrane is installed across the critical sections, following the same method used on the front deck. Working together, the membrane and flashing create multiple layers of protection, sealing vulnerable areas and directing water safely away from the structure. In a climate like this, that extra protection matters. Without it, moisture can gradually penetrate exposed wood and lead to costly damage over time. With the structure fully secured, the beams strengthened, the joists and blocking locked into place, and the waterproofing complete, it's finally time for the decking. The boards are installed one at a time across the surface, with each piece carefully positioned to maintain consistent spacing and clean, straight lines throughout the deck. By now, the work has settled into a steady rhythm. Place a board, line it up, secure it, then move on to the next. The process repeats over and over, with small adjustments being made along the way to keep every line straight and every detail consistent. Every opening is prepared ahead of time before installation begins. Waterproofing is applied and shims are used to fine-tune the surfaces so the frames will fit correctly and sit level. The weather doesn't make things easy. Snow and freezing temperatures add extra challenges to nearly every step. Even so, the priority remains unchanged. Get everything properly prepared now so the windows and doors can be installed quickly and accurately when the time comes.
With the A-frame now fully enclosed and winter beginning to settle in outside, the work finally shifts indoors. The first task is installing roof baffles along the rafters, extending from the base of the roof all the way to the ridge. These baffles form a continuous airflow channel, allowing ventilation to move freely through the roof system. It's a hidden detail, but an important one, helping control moisture and maintain the long-term health of the structure.
The main purpose of this system is proper ventilation. By maintaining an open airspace behind the insulation, any moisture that might build up inside the roof can escape instead of becoming trapped. This allows air to flow continuously from the lower intake points to the peak, helping keep the roof structure dry while preserving its insulating efficiency. It's a simple concept, but one that plays a major role in the long-term performance of the cabin. As the insulation begins filling the walls and roof, the project starts to feel different. The cabin is no longer just a weatherproof shell standing in the woods. For the first time, it begins to feel like a real interior space. From this point forward, the focus shifts toward the systems that will make it livable. Installing heat, running electrical wiring, and completing the details that transform a structure into a home. Step by step, the cabin moves closer to everyday life, even as winter continues to tighten its grip outside. The journey is far from finished. Reaching this point marks the beginning of a new stage rather than the end of the story. The cabin now stands complete on the outside, but the work of turning it into a true home is still ahead. Interior finishes, functional systems, and the personal details that give a space its character are all yet to come. The next chapters will follow that transformation as the interior slowly evolves from a bare structure into a warm and welcoming living space. There's still plenty to build, plenty to learn, and plenty to see as each empty corner takes on new purpose. If you've enjoyed following this project so far, stay with us for what's next. Subscribe for future builds and share your ideas for what project you'd like to see brought to life next.